And welcome back again, yours truly, Anthony Parker of Keeping It Honest. Remember, we keep it simple, we keep it honest, and we keep it real. If you have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly. It's parkerman2011 at gmail.com, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. And you can text me, contact me, 216 702 3718, 216 702 3718. And if you're new to the show, you don't know what we're about, we try to get both sides of the story. We try to do the left side, we try to do the right side. And at the end, hopefully you will decide. But no matter what, it's the truth. So if you're upset with me, you don't like what you hear, then we're doing our job. Little background again about yours truly. I have done, I guess, mass media communication, social media for a lot of years. Did mainstream radio and TV, worked for community small papers. So this show coming up, I really appreciate it because I'm an advocate as far as community newspapers, telling that side of the story that you don't get. You may not get that from mainstream, but you will get it from the small community newspapers. So no matter what, if you have one in your community, please support it because if you don't, you really won't have that community voice. And it's interesting because a lot of people in society, they don't like politicians, they don't like pastors, and of course, they don't like the media because they think we spend everything in our own way. So when I tell people to support us because we're putting in that hard work, please do that. On this show, and my background, like I said, is in mainstream media. Since I've been doing streaming, I found out how much, unfortunately, mainstream media doesn't give you. I've seen things done on regular TV and cable and talked about where I never saw them talked about on streaming. And since I've been doing this, you can take that any way you want to. I've been very proud of what I've tried to do. I've tried to get everything in a journalistic manner. So when you see all this stuff out here, I'm not just having papers out here. I'm doing a lot of research to get it right. So on this program today, there was a story. I'm gonna go background a little bit of this newspaper in Kansas City, and I was online reading about this paper, and it had gotten raided by the police, FBI. They raided the paper. They took the equipment, took all the resources that a newspaper would need, that a journalist would need. So as I'm reading this, I'm like, man, this is a fascinating story. How can the, I guess, law enforcement, how do they have the rights to break up the First Amendment rights and go inside a newspaper and take all of the equipment? So like right here we go. This is Marion County Records in Kansas City. Little small town paper. A lot of people in their communities have small town papers like that. I guess they do investigative stories. And maybe they kind of ticked off the wrong person because that next day, not too long after they were at and I'll let Eric tell you about it. After they were at this event, they came, the police department came and raided their papers. They took computers, they took servers, they took phones, anything and everything related to putting together this paper. Now, this paper comes out weekly every Wednesday. And not only that, did they go to the paper, they went to the owner of the paper and they took equipment from her house, took her phone, took anything and everything technical. And a day after they came to her house, she unfortunately passed away. Her name is Miss Joan Meyer. And we're going to talk about her because she's been a part of the paper for years. And it makes you think because the son, Eric, is saying because of that, the raid and the stress on the mom, that it caused her to pass away. And when you do something that bad, somebody has to be held accountable. So sit back, relax, and think about journalists, small newspapers, the freedom of the press, the law, and when our job is to tell the stories, we have to be ready to take the hits. But was this hit worth it? Something we're going to think about right after this. back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker of Keeping It Honest. And speaking of honest, we have on the program Mr. Eric Meyer. How you doing today?
Just fine, Anthony. Getting
So,
along.
like I said, I was fascinated by this story, and I told you not too long ago when I was reading about the story online, and it was like it was one day as far as you guys getting rated, but it was a long story. I went online reading different stories, and then as I'm reading that, I go to another clip, and it talks about what happened with your mother. So
Yeah.
I am sorry for your loss too.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. It is a story that doesn't stop. I just, right before we started speaking, I just posted a breaking news piece about it. That is an allegation that has come up new that the police chief told one of the key figures in the case to destroy text messages that the two had exchanged before the raid. You don't normally go around telling people to destroy evidence unless there's something in it you want to keep people from seeing. So we don't know what's going to happen out of that. But
I said I've seen you on interviews like all over the place. And excuse me, I appreciate the time that you're giving me because I know I was trying to reach you for a while. And of course, you were saying you were still trying to get all your stuff back and straighten it out.
yeah, we now have pretty well got all our material back. You're still struggling with things. The one thing you mentioned in your intro that you were talking about the people on the right and the people on the left and hearing both sides. One of the things that's most interesting to us about this entire thing is we have heard from literally tens of thousands of people, and they've come from not one of them. Not a single one of those messages has in any way been critical of us or saying, you media types should not think that you're above the law or whatever else. But they've come from about as diverse a group as you could imagine. People on the very far right, people on the very far left. I was reading them the other day and just going through them, and I haven't answered all of them because I physically couldn't. But the one I opened up said, these people that did this must have been Republicans. And the next one I opened up said, these people who did it must be Democrats. And it is very much a common thread that this is something that touched a nerve for people, that the idea that the press needs to exist and be free to report things and not be subject to seizure and really, to be honest with you, they didn't execute the search warrant to get any information. If they would have done that to get information, they already knew where we got the document from. They had it in their application, knew where it was from. The document that they were concerned about, I don't know whether you can see it in this camera, it was sitting right here on my desk.
Okay.
My computer is sitting right over here on my desk on the other side. They didn't take it. I mean, but what they did do was show up in huge numbers. This was a bullying exercise, plain and simple.
And so everything else, but didn't take what was on your desk.
Yeah, no, they didn't. The printed note of it, which, by the way, also had the notes that we'd used and how we obtained a copy of it by calling the state and they told us how to get it legally, and they later admitted it was legal, but they didn't do that. But they showed up at my mother's house, and I lived there too. She's 98, and I was helping care for her, although she really didn't need that much help. She was in pretty good condition, but they showed up there with 7 police officers. Okay. I mean, she's a pretty strong-willed woman, but I mean, they showed up at a house of a guy who had raped his 7-year-old granddaughter with 2 people. I mean, 7.
I know you were saying that one of the officers was a neighbor too.
Yeah, he lives next door. Actually, he's since resigned from the department.
Okay. Since this happened, so tell us a little bit about this story. We know it's a raid at a newspaper, but it's an interesting story in a small town of about 2,000 people.
Well, it was a raid about a story that we decided we weren't going to run. that even makes it more interesting because we had gotten a leak that a local restaurant owner was driving illegally that she had had a conviction for drunken driving more than a decade ago,
Mhm.
that she'd gotten a diversion agreement from, but never fulfilled the terms of the diversion agreement and just continued to drive by not having a license. And
Okay.
we were a little suspicious of the document, and we checked out to make sure that it was a legitimate document. And that was the copy that was sitting on my desk, was the original that was given to us. And we found that, yes, indeed, you could obtain this document from a state website, a public website,
Right.
where you're supposed to. And we looked at it, and then we found out that really what was going on was she was getting a divorce from her husband, and they were arguing over who should keep their cars. And the husband's contention was he should get all of them because he was the only one who had a valid driver's license and she shouldn't. And she was trying to clean up her driver's license. And we said to ourselves, you know, this is not news. This is bickering in a divorce case. We don't see that there's a story in it. But the source who gave us the information also alleged that local police were fully aware of the fact that she was driving illegally and weren't doing anything about it.
Okay.
And so we thought we should notify the police of that. And we told them, we sent them a note saying what we knew, and saying we weren't going to run a story, but if you wanted any additional, and we don't think there's anything to do with this,
Mhm.
but if you want anything else, give us a call. They never called. Simultaneously, the vice mayor also received the same document from the same source.
Okay.
And she had brought into question, the restaurant owner was trying to get a liquor license.
Right.
And she had sent a note off to the city administrator saying, maybe we should have the police check this out. If she doesn't really have she's got this old DUI. I don't know what it means, but the police could look at it.
Right.
Neither she nor we heard back from the police at all on this. But a week later, they show up at our office and her home and my mother's home in this massive coordinated raid that the police had bragged about would be the largest raid in the history of Marion, Kansas. They called in extra off-duty officers. They called in state fire marshals who can fill in as police officers.
Wow.
So that they had enough people to go to these three houses simultaneously, as if we were like the Medellin drug cartel or something, or, they call out the SWAT team for a jaywalker, but
Right.
it turned out that the jaywalker was in the crosswalk and legal. And part of the unusual thing about all this is that the vice mayor and the mayor don't get along.
Mhm.
And the police chief was hired by the mayor, and the mayor and the newspaper don't really get along. And isn't it funny that when they went off and ran their raid, they knew where the document came from. They didn't search the house of that person. They had a suspicion where she had retained the document.
Uh-huh.
They didn't search that house either. They just searched, interestingly, the two targets of the mayor. And the mayor had been involved in this discussion. Now, he contends, he said, I want nothing to know about it. But he also says, and that's one of the things that's in our breaking news piece, he'd been trying to get rid of the vice mayor for a long time. And he said, the only way I can get rid of the vice mayor is if she's guilty of some crime.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you've got a police chief that's, he's trying to impress the mayor. And he's trying to impress the mayor because he had a bad history in Kansas City where he had worked before. And I mean, he left a job paying over $110,000 to go to one paying $60,000.
Okay.
That's pretty telling right there.
Right.
He initially, we'd learned from sources, was being demoted by the Kansas City Police Department.
Okay.
He denied that initially and threatened to sue us if we used it. He later admitted it was true. He's accused of all sorts of things: sexual impropriety, revving through a crime scene, running over a dead body with his police car. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that he was accused of. We never printed that because we couldn't get the cops on the record. And anybody who's ever dealt with police know that it's very difficult to get one police officer to talk about the misdeeds of another police officer.
Mm-hmm.
They all, and I guess it's understandable, they don't want to be in a dark alley and have their partner, not have their back in case something happens. And they don't want them to think that they're a rat who will do something, but they still won't go on the record with this. And there's some pretty prominent people who were involved in this discussion, but We initially thought that this was his attempt to gain access to the material we had on him.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly now don't think it was that. I think it was just classic out and out bullying. He was trying to impress the mayor, and he wanted to bully us and put us in our place. Don't ask these dang questions you ask. Why are you asking questions?
So when your stuff was taken and they brought it back, how do you know they didn't copy it?
Well, they eventually brought it back.
Uh-huh.
They took it on a Friday and returned it on a Wednesday. We had to put out a paper on a Tuesday without it.
Right.
So we found a bunch of other old equipment that we had Windows XP computers that we had thrown in our junk room, and we brought them out and hooked them up and used that to get the paper out. They brought them back Wednesday, and it was interesting because when you get a search warrant, they give you an inventory of the things that they've seized.
Right.
After they gave us the inventory, they added an additional item to it, which was a copy of the contents of one of our hard drives and actually other parts of the network. Our attorney, after a lengthy discussion, and it took several weeks, and it took a judge's order, and the judge's order was questioned, and finally the judge said, basically, hey, I've already ruled on this. You're supposed to give it to him. Give it to him.
Right.
We eventually got it back. They really did a pretty ham-handed job of searching for it. The software they were doing was designed to search for pornography, not documents. And their search terms, you're working out of a library sending this program together. They didn't know Boolean search terms. They searched our computers for the word Kansas. Well, it's going to appear in everything we have.
Right.
But one of the things that we did get the material back, they destroyed the hard drive it was on and gave us a copy of its contents. We did find in that contents that one of our reporters, they had this one page that had like every account she had, all of her email, all of her bank accounts, all of her, and what her account username and password were for that. So she's gone through and changed all of those.
Okay.
We don't know exactly what they did. We don't think, just honestly, we don't think they were smart enough to have done much more than that.
I was gonna say, as a journalist and all the information you have, is either you think they cloned it and they got their copies, but from you knowing a little bit about them, you're saying, I hate to say that, not giving them even that much credit.
Well, we sent all this stuff off to a forensic analyst
Okay.
that our attorney found, and he found what their files had hit on. And there were funny things. One of the things that repeatedly showed up on their hits was a clipping from someone who had applied for a job in 2017. We didn't hire him, but it was about the spookiest hotels in Arkansas. And
Okay.
and that kept getting hits. One of the other things that kept getting hits, we had for an ad that about courthouse being closed, we had the logo of the judicial district, the 8th judicial district of Kansas, kept getting hits on this too. So none of the things that showed up in their hit list were in any way relevant to anything. Most of it was just junk. So we don't think they got anything. I mean, we don't know. We don't know what they did. They were in our office. We do have surveillance cameras, security cameras in the office. So we were able to record kind of what they looked at.
Right.
They rifled through a bunch of papers. They didn't go through file cabinets or drawers. It didn't seem to. They did strange things, like they photographed our bathrooms, including one old bathroom that we hadn't used, and it was closed up 50 years ago. But they photographed it. We don't know why, but they did that and brought it back, and now they're waiting. And the thing that really challenges us the most is that anytime, and we've heard this 1,000 times, anytime somebody's accused of wrongdoing, and the county attorney said the warrants were not sufficient, he withdrew the warrants. A judge endorsed that decision. But the police chief who requested it, the judge who signed it, they're both still sitting doing their job. They haven't been suspended. Nothing's been done to them.
And so at the end of this, because they didn't find anything, did they apologize or?
Nope.
Okay.
They said that when the full story comes out, you will see that the criminal justice system is vindicated. Well, that's not proving to be true. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the KBI, which is like the FBI in
Right.
Kansas, is now taking over the investigation. Their focus, according to what they've told us, is not on anything we did, but on this business about destroying evidence and whether they exceeded the scope of their search warrant. It's funny that the warrant for searching the vice mayor's house,
Uh-huh.
the application for it lists a certain set of crimes that she was supposedly done, but that's not what the warrant lists. It lists a different set that weren't
Okay.
even mentioned in the application.
Okay.
So it's very irregular. I mean, there's about 15 ways that these warrants would have been quashed. We don't know how they got signed. The district magistrate judge, and people get confused about this. They hear it's a magistrate and they think it's somebody who doesn't have a law degree. She
Okay.
actually does. She'd been the county attorney in another county. And we don't know, though, whether it was a case of, Radar O'Reilly taking it to Colonel Blake and, just
Okay.
sign it off. We know that the county attorney denied seeing them. We know that he wasn't there that day. We know that the probable cause affidavits didn't get filed with the court until 3 days after the warrant was issued. And so there's all sorts of irregularities involving this.
So as I tried to piece together the story, I'm reading a lot of stories about what happened from a lot of the publications. So let's see if I can kind of do cliff notes, and you're filling in the blanks as I'm talking to you. But from what I gathered, and I don't know if I'm starting from the beginning, there was a meet and greet. Council, I guess it was it a council person there?
No, this was for a congressman,
Oh, a congressman.
and there were a number of county commissioners and city commissioners and so on, which guaranteed that it had to be a public meeting because
Right.
there were the majority of these governing bodies were there, and the restaurant owner asked us to be removed by the police chief.
And that's Miss Newell, right?
That's Carrie Newell asked us for Gideon Cody to remove us from that. That was a week before the raid.
Right.
And we wrote about it. The congressman apologized for it. They didn't apologize. They used, we reserve the right to serve whoever we please. And I said, you're kind of using a line that's been used very badly
Right.
by a number of people in the past. And they then objected to my using that. And I said, you're calling us racist. And I said, no, I'm not calling you racist. I'm saying you're using lines that racists used.
Right.
But it was not a big deal. The congressman came down and sat with us. Actually, it was probably better for us because he
Okay.
came down and spent an hour here talking to us alone. So we got a chance to have one-on-one time with him.
So
But
that part really good. So when you guys left, where was the part that your reporter, where she said on her Facebook page that she was sent a message?
yeah, we ran a story about being ejected from the meeting. And it was that afternoon when the story came out that a source, a woman, she's said who she is. Pam Mogg is her name. Pam Mogg sent Phyllis Zorn, our reporter, a note saying, I see you got thrown out of this meeting. She's been driving illegally for years, and you should know about this and report it. And we said, well, what do you mean? You've got to prove that. We can't just report rumors. And by private message, then Pam sent this screenshot of this letter. Well, we didn't want to be a Dan Rather,
Right.
and have a fake document. So the first thing we did, because there were a lot of reasons to question it, we thought initially, we knew she was going through a divorce. We thought maybe the letter was sent to her old address and her husband had intercepted it and sent it off. So, and you can actually see this on the printout of our letter. Our reporter highlighted, no, it's her new address.
Right.
And then we went back and said, well, how did you get it to the source? And she says, well, it's there. It's on this thing. And she wasn't very clear about it. And we tried to find it. And we were having trouble finding it. But it was dated August 2nd. It was dated August 1st, and we found it on August 2nd. So that's
Okay.
another, it was awfully recent to be able to be found
Right.
on a search. So we kept searching. We couldn't replicate how she'd obtained the document, which is interesting because she isn't the one who did it. Is the estranged husband Ryan is the one who actually gave her the document, which she then gave to us. But we finally called the state and said, we've got this thing, and how did somebody get it? And they said, oh, well, you can get it by following this button, this button, this button, this button, and you type this in, and this is public. There's another way to do it that charges you $16, and that's private, and you're not supposed to do it unless you're the person. So you don't want to do that. And we didn't do that. And actually, there's notes about the $16 one is for this that are written on this document. Our reporter took notes while she was looking at it, and we got it, and we got it once. We didn't even print it out. We didn't download it. We just looked to make sure it was the same document as what Pam Mogg had sent us. Because then the next question was, we wanted to know whether we were going to run it or do anything with it. And we had decided by that time that we weren't going to do anything with it.
So, what would you have run it for? Here's a lady in the community that is trying to get her license reinstated. I mean, is that?
No, I don't. That was our decision. We decided there wasn't news here. This was just a couple sniping at each other in a divorce case, and the only news that we could see was that if the police really were well aware of this and not doing anything about it, but we couldn't prove that. So there's no story to run. We have later, since this is broken, we have heard from officers who have admitted that it was true. But they won't go on the record. They will tell you that yeah, they knew it. They said the reason they wouldn't invest her, it wasn't a conspiracy or anything. They said she was such a, they used the B word, that they didn't want to mess with her, basically.
And so she was trying to get a liquor license for her restaurant?
She was actually trying to get a catering liquor license. Her actual liquor license, meanwhile, expired, and she doesn't have it. And she can't get it because her husband has his own felony DUI conviction. And Kansas law does not allow you, if your spouse has a felony DUI, to get a liquor license. So she's having to wait until after they're divorced.
Oh, wow.
And you can have a DUI and get a liquor license, but you can't have had it within 2 years, and it can't have been a felony. But she says that he has had a felony. I have not been able to verify that. So that part of the reason is the court record system in Kansas is currently going through a migration from one system to another, and pieces of it are in different systems, and it's very difficult to verify certain things about it. But
so after that, then was it the next day after you guys did the you sent a letter to the police pretty much, or dropped a line in?
We got the material on a Wednesday. We took Thursday to look at it, and by Friday we had figured out where it had come, and we'd also done enough research. We'd talked to some other sources and figured out what was going on in their divorce. Actually, it was the kid who mows his lawn, the husband had bragged to. But by Friday, we figured out that we weren't going to run it, and that's when I sent the note off to the sheriff and the police chief. The police chief did not see that note because he works from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. He didn't see it until Monday morning. And that's when then everybody started calling her on Monday morning. She went to a city council meeting and accused us. They got her all, she's an excitable person. And they got her all revved up about this. They called her and said, "You've been the victim of a crime." She didn't report a crime. They told her she'd been the victim of a crime. They got her all excited. She went to the city council meeting about it. She complained that 1, we had broken into some computer and stolen something. 2, that we had given it to the vice mayor, and 3, that the vice mayor had posted it all over Facebook. Well, none of those 3 things were true. And in fact, I had a call with her after the city council meeting, and she admitted that she knew they weren't true. I think she was just so angry that she said them, but she said, no, she actually identified who the person was who gave us the document. She says, I'll bet you that it's my My husband gave it to Pam Mogg, and Pam Mogg gave it to you and gave it to Ruth. And that's exactly what happened. She knew it that night. And I had some discussions with her about then, why did you say something else in a public meeting? Well, I didn't get a very good answer to that.
And she knew she was lying or fabricating when she said this in front of
I
everybody.
mean, I think whether you know something or you just are so mad that you sort of overstate your case. I don't know what it was, but we reported that on Wednesday.